Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm here with Michelle Tinsley, CEO of Sciata. How are you today, Michelle?
Good. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into the interview here. Start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Sure. I joined Sciata about a year ago. What we're doing is building a digital consultancy around digital transformation. We will go in and do custom software, data engineering, AI work, and software engineering projects that truly transform the way our customers are driving their businesses. My prior background to this was 26 years at Intel in a variety of roles across finance, general management, product, and sales. And then I worked 6.5 years in the land of startups, started three different companies, and decided that after that, I wanted to get into private equity. So, Sciata is private equity backed, and we're taking this company and really growing it organically, but also doing integrations and M&As as we go.
And obviously, you do a fair bit of work in healthcare, right? And there's a lot of digital
Yes.
transformation in healthcare.
Absolutely. So our top two verticals today are financial services and healthcare. I can give you some examples of what we've done in the healthcare space. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So I know many hospital leaders they're certainly interested in AI, but they struggle with where to begin. What advice do you have to help them get started?
For me, there's really two explicit steps I would have them take. The first is think about what is a use case or a challenge or a problem I want to go solve, where AI would be the best solution for that. So getting really clear on that value proposition, but also the user experience that you're going to want. That'll lead to then what data is required to go
Mhm.
light that up. And the question will be, do you have that data? Is your organization big enough? Again, most large hospitals, networks, they are big enough, but we've dealt with some smaller clients where they don't have the millions and millions of lines of code or data points. So that would mean then tapping into large language models that already exist out there. But the key here is the second step is looking at your data and saying, is that data in order? Because sadly, a lot of companies will jump in and start charging you and wanting to build models and deploy AI. But if you haven't really governed the data, structured it, and cleansed it first, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out. So it's hard to predict things if you're in a very noisy, state of your data.
So I imagine that if they want to get some momentum, you want to find some areas where that data is not going to be the problem, correct?
Exactly. And that's why I say don't pick the crown jewels, the hardest Six Sigma. My PE partner would say don't just set out on the gymnast mat and decide you're going to do a triple sow cow. First time you do something, let's start with the back bend. Let's start with a cartwheel first, and then you work your way up to the harder stuff. And we love to start with a very explicit use case, doing proof of concept around that.
Yeah.
And then when they see the success and the value behind that, now starting to extend that bigger and broader across the company.
When you're engaged with your healthcare clients, what's the genesis of it? Are you working with a technology leader? Is it coming from the top, the board of directors? What the catalyst behind it?
It depends on the size of the company. In the larger firms, it is more they either head of digital transformation or the CIO, because they're looking at how do I continually manage to a budget that's flatter down,
Yep.
and yet the requirements of the organization are growing all the time. In a smaller firm, we do have an example where we worked with a healthcare startup here in Phoenix. We worked with the CEO, and we were their initial R&D team, and it's our ideal client is those much larger firms, but we can work with the smaller ones as well. And it just tends to be more line of business when you're in the smaller firms.
Can you share some examples of healthcare organizations that started small with AI and achieved those results?
Yeah, absolutely. So our first one is with Sonora Quest Labs. They're a company that has thousands of labs across the United States where you can go get your blood drawn for your primary care doctor. And what they were struggling with is when they came to us, they had very limited insights into their current patient base.
Hmm.
People would show up, but it was based on a doctor's order. There was no predictability to that. And it was hard for them to make any kind of informed marketing decisions on where should we put the next location, how busy or oversubscribed are certain locations, are there some that are underutilized? And they were manually creating reports for various departments, and that was very time consuming. What we did is we came in and first developed a framework to look at the client's vision for where they wanted data and analytics.
Mhm.
And we established a data lake to centralize all that data, taking things from the various locations and bringing them in a consistent fashion into that data lake. We could then create from that data lake high value value AI models that would be able to identify high value insights and predictive use cases. That client is now scaling in the hospital ecosystem and driving new revenue streams. As you can imagine, offering, say, hey, what if we, SonoriQuest, put a blood draw location within this hospital? Now it's not only convenient to your clients, but we know from the predictive insights that that's going to be a very busy, well-utilized location. Our takeaway from that was that any entity can benefit from a 360-degree view of their customers. This isn't just what your CRM can do, but really looking at some of that operational data as well, like how many customers were showing up, what was the service time, what was their arrival rates. And by easily accessing those critical data points and looking for the relationships across applications, you can uncover a lot of value.
When you take on a project like that, just walk us through the progression. Is there a discovery phase and then moving from there? How does that work, Michelle?
What Sciata will typically do is in that first initial meeting with the client, we'll say, what's your pain point? In this case, they've got so much data and it's all different pockets and it's not homogenized. We don't see holistically, and we're manually creating these reports. We do each location, for instance, was starting to create management reports. We say, okay, we hear that pain point. Let's really do a second meeting where we auger in on what is the value of solving that pain point for you. Because we don't want to go implement a solution that's $10 million to go implement when we're solving a $1 million pain point. So we first articulate, okay, what's that value to them? How do we go about that? We look for a cost-efficient way to go do that. And then we write up a scope of work that says, okay, here's the statement of work of what we're going to do for you. We're going to assemble a team that has the right levels of experience, that has the right skills on the team. We even ramp up and ramp off people on those teams, because you may, if you're creating this data environment, you probably need a DevOps engineer. You may need an ETL or a data analyst to help translate data from their current systems into this new data lake. But those aren't needed the full project length, and they don't need to be there on day one. So we'll usually start with the solution architect, a PM, and a few other critical resources on day one. We'll ramp up to a peak on the project, ramp down. And then when the project wraps up, we sit down with the client and say, how do we do? We set out with this scope of work to accomplish these things. We think we got there. We usually articulate upfront KPIs of success on how we know this is working the right way. And then we wrap up. Now, in some cases, it may turn into the next assignment with them, because now they go, hey, this is phenomenal, but by the way, we now have another problem that's surfaced, and we want you to do something similar or come in and help us implement a system that will now give us even more capabilities for the organization.
So at what point in the AI journey should hospital leaders start focusing more intensively on formal data governance? And how can they approach this?
I say right up front, even at our company, I say we drink our own champagne here, meaning I'm not going to tell them, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, it's great for you to go do all this AI stuff, and then I'm not doing it myself. We signed up to use a paid Copilot license, but first we had to say, let's look at the permission levels, because what it's going to do is look at our internal SharePoint, and whoever has permissions to certain folders, that's going to be the default permissions for the AI work as well. And so, given when we implemented SharePoint years ago, we never had that mindset. Let's do the data governance. It didn't take long. It was an hour meeting to say, okay, given the structure, there's certain, like, say the financials folder, maybe only the CFO and I need access to that, and not every person on the team. Whereas contracts, I want my operations team having full access to that contracts folder, because they want visibility and suck all the prior scopes of work we've done in contracts in. So if we use Copilot to generate an SOW Rev 1, we've got that knowledge and history incorporated.
Rolling up your sleeves and getting this done. From the sound of your what you said, this isn't like a month-long thing or several months. It's a question of.
No, and that's why people love working with us, because we're not a giant consulting firm. I won't name names. But a lot of them, they'll come in and say, okay, it's $3 million to get out of bed and show up on your doorstep tomorrow. It's a giant retainer, but hey, trust us, we're going to be worth it. We're instead, let's get to a real tangible scope of work, get you to agree to that. We'll go deliver on that. And by us working together, you're going to see that this is a great partnership, that we're here for your success. But I would also say a lot of times companies talk about they don't know where to get started. So pull in a company like us where we've done over 25 AI implementations. We're going to bring the learnings, the scars, the bruises that we learned on those with us and know how to see around corners for what to look out for versus you feel like you're at it in the woods with a butter knife, that you want to be sure that you're pulling in some help here. And then sometimes this does transition into more of a managed service environment where, hey, you stood up these models, but now we need them maintained. Don't know if we want a full-time person to go do that, but could they sign a contract with us and we'll make sure that we're both auditing and making sure that the training is kept up to date and the models keep functioning as they should.
What do you think the impact as AI and LLMs, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or these other models, become more and more powerful? What do you think the impact on the IT infrastructure of a healthcare system will be? Will it get simpler? What do you think, Michelle? What's the impact?
It is more complex because way back in the day, because I've been in tech for so long, it used to be we had an on-premise data center, and everybody built their own data centers. Then it was this movement to the cloud, and then people were straddling between what's in the cloud, what's on site. You got to hybrid cloud. Well, now we're getting into where companies have many different cloud instances, and what they're trying to do to keep it simpler is they're implementing these virtualization layers, and it's more about the orchestration then between the how do we know when to go with which use case to use which cloud instance and what data pile there. And we would try to keep things simple. We've worked with some companies where they've admitted we got two different data warehouses because we grow so fast that's what happened. And we will coach them on it's best to get that back into one instance so then you can do the governance once and not worry about, well, we locked down security and permissions on this version, but somehow the copied or mirrored data over here, they have a wide range of permissions. And so really looking at trying to keep it simple, but the complexity is going to increase. Even though these tools are both powerful and new to use, it's changing the way the humans involved because we're going to have to apply a lot more judgment. We're going to have to read up on things, especially in a healthcare setting. It's much the legal use cases where you need to make sure that it's not a hallucination. In legal, they may come back and cite a case study that was in this court of law. Well, you got to go double check that because sometimes those were pure hallucinations and the AI made that up. And so you don't want to be running with that and assuming it's case precedent. In this case, in healthcare, saying that there was a scientific study that concluded XYZ, double checking that was that really the case? Is that journal and that paper truly, written as that? Or is the model extrapolating a bit too much out of the relevant range?
Well, that's a good segue into the next question around how can hospitals balance innovation speed with compliance requirements when implementing AI?
I typically coach them to look at this as a portfolio approach where you want to consistently have, say, 10-15% of the budget for that governance is budgeting for safety and quality. You never want that to be zero, but you don't want it to be half the budget or more. And sometimes what happens is people do budget zero and then they go implement a bunch of stuff. And then there's a bad attack in the security setting where you get a cyber attack or something. And now it's the urgent situation where you've got to drop everything and go shift your priorities and go do that massive investment. But it should be making those deployments across time. And that way you can balance it with the things that are also going to be giving you that ROI, a bottom line, because you overamp on the safety and compliance, and now you're not generating the business return that your board and your CEO are going to be looking for. Because if we do this right, it should be truly transformative that as we do this and you're generating more bottom line profits and margins and better experience for your customers and clients, you go, okay, now we have more money to invest in the business and do things right.
So, what about resource allocations, budget, personnel, time? Which they be realistically thinking about? I mean, is there a large retraining effort that goes into their staff? Is it restaffing? What have you learned and seen, Michelle?
I think that we take it by use case. So rather than saying, let's go company wide and train everybody on AI all at once, I mean, that's a huge lift. And admittedly, there's going to be the 16% of fast adopters in your employee population that will use it right after the training, and then the other 84% that don't do anything because of the tyranny of the urgent. And then a year later, they're like going to be, dang, I wish I would have had that training now. We do the waves on a beach approach, which is you can start with that first use case, look at the affected users and the population and the data, go train them first, go do the implementations, get the value. Now you go for a successively bigger wave, and that will open up more population. And usually you're going to get get to about 20-30% at the tipping point where the employees are going to be coming forward and saying, hey, I'm willing to, do that on my own, or, let me squeeze that hour or two training into my workday because I'm seeing how my peers are benefit from using these skills. And I'm going to instantly get that, time back in less, non-value added things where I take it from my job and say, rather than having to go write a blog from scratch from an open sheet of paper, I can now prompt the generative AI to come up with a first pass on it. And now I'm playing editor, adding in my tone, my voice. With Copilot in a private instance, you can load up your brand guide, your brand sentiment. These are ideal customer profiles. And what you're getting back on that first pass is going to get better and better the more you learn about how to tailor your prompting.
This has been a great interview, Michelle. Thanks so much. Just one final question here. What final advice would you give hospital executives who recognize AI's potential, but they're stuck planning rather than doing?
I would say start learning by jumping in. I think people say jump in, it's summer, the water's warm, but it's literally the more you wait, the more you're going to get behind. And at some point, the statistic I heard from some industry literature was for every 3 months you wait to deploy AI, you get 6 months behind. And so start looking at benchmarking yourself against your competitors and saying, where are they at on their AI journey? If they've already started, you're behind. And really looking at it doesn't mean multi-million-dollar day one investment. How do we start with an explicit use case, getting some pilot learnings going? And those are going to be learnings. Not every pilot and experiment is going to be 100% success. So looking at it and going, how do we then learn from that and readapt what we do next?
This has been incredibly insightful. Congratulations on all your progress so far, and wishing you all the best success going forward, Michelle.
Thanks, Dario.